Hey there! Today I want to share kind of the first step in a living room makeover that I'm doing, and that is I'm going to be building a faux fireplace. We just recently moved into a new build home and it just doesn't really have any character, so I want to add some fun features to it, and the first thing I'm going to be doing is a faux fireplace. So I just made my frame out of 1x2 pine lumber, which is really inexpensive. It's definitely not heavy duty by any means, but I did find that it did a great job for this faux fireplace purpose, but you could certainly use 2x4s if you wanted to. So I started out by just measuring out where I wanted my supports to be, and I pre-drilled those holes for my frame. This is going to be the front of my fireplace that I'm framing in right now. And then I just used 1.5-inch screws to secure those supports into the top pieces. With this lumber, you definitely want to make sure to pre-drill all of your holes because it can split pretty easily. So I wouldn't skip that step, and even with pre-drilling the holes, I still had some splitting. Nothing too terrible, but I did have some. So this is like the basic layout I was going for the front of my faux fireplace frame. After I had the front part of the frame done, I went ahead and started on the back, which will look a little different than what I actually ended up with here, but it pretty much ended up being the exact same thing as the front of the frame. I just use these little blocks to connect the front and back together because I will be using a 4x6 beam as my mantle, and so my faux fireplace is actually super thin, so this just seemed like the best way to connect the front and back pieces of the frame, and it was actually pretty sturdy. I had plenty of 1x2s that I picked up for this project, so I decided to add some extra support into any areas that I thought I might need it. I am going to include a more detailed picture of what my frame ended up being on the blog, so I'll link that below, so I'll have that, but you'll just see me adding these pieces in the back, and that'll be the beginning of the support for my chevron detail that I'm going to be making out of reclaimed wood on the back of the fireplace. So I covered my entire faux fireplace with sheetrock because it's way cheaper than trying to buy plywood, and it also is a great support for like the plaster finish I'm going to be doing, hoping to achieve a little bit of a cement look. Okay, so I've got the fireplace built, the body of it, and I want to give it a rock look, kind of like stucco rock cement look. And so to do that, I'm going to be using this joint compound or plaster. You can get it pre-mixed from the hardware store. And I'm going to mix a little bit of sand into that, and then I'm going to use a trowel to put a layer roughly over the whole body of the fireplace. So as I mentioned, I'll be using this joint compound as well as some sand to try to get that cement look on my fireplace. So I literally just scooped it right out of the bucket. I'll be sure to link the products I used down below. And I picked up some construction sand and mixed about half a cup of that into my joint compound, and then I just stirred it around until all the sand was evenly mixed throughout. You do want your joint compound to be kind of like a mayonnaise-like consistency, but really you can go for whatever condiment you best identify with. Woody. So I really don't have any impressive troweling tricks for this project. Pretty much just smearing the joint compound with the sand mixture all over the surface of the faux fireplace. The only kind of tip I have is you can't press too hard You want to go light-handedly or else the sand will drag through. You can see right there I had one little drag spot of a larger piece of sand. So just kind of lightly spread it across until you get the entire thing covered. I also was trying to keep my layer thin because I know that if you get too thick of a layer of the joint compound, it can crack while it's drying. So I didn't have too many cracks, but there were a few. So I just went in with this hole filler and filled all the cracks with that, which worked really well. If you had, for some reason, a lot of cracks, it may make sense to do another layer of the joint compound. I wanted to just clean up the edges and any little spots that I didn't like the texture of on my body of my faux fireplace here. So I just took a low grit sandpaper and went over the whole thing, cleaning up the edges and just making it look a little bit more smooth. Then I wanted to see how it was looking, and so we did a little dry fit. I did anticipate having the crack behind the faux fireplace where the molding holds the fireplace out from the wall, and I was thinking that I would put molding here, but I ended up changing my mind because I just wanted it to look a little bit more seamless. So to remedy that crack I had in between the fireplace and the wall, I'm actually going to just put a little strip of sheetrock back behind this, which is the perfect width of 1/2 inch to fill that crack, and then I'll add a little spackle on top to blend it in, and then I won't have to worry about that space behind the fireplace. So as I already explained, I went ahead and cut some very small strips of sheetrock out and just screwed those to the back of the fireplace and went over that with spackle to blend it in, and that filled the space in nicely. So after I cut and stained my 4x6 beam how I wanted it to be, I went ahead and attached it to my faux fireplace. I just grabbed my 1.5 inch screws and went in from underneath and attached that directly into the frame. To secure the fireplace to the wall, I spanned this board behind it in between studs so that I would have a solid spot to attach my fireplace to, and I attached that in a couple places with some 3-inch screws. I wanted to do a nice chevron reclaimed wood back to my fireplace, so this is where those wood supports came in that I was kind of talking about earlier, and you could, if you had a piece of plywood, make a solid surface to save yourself the hassle of worrying about where the supports need to be placed. But basically I just cut out my pieces. All the angles are 45 degrees, and then you just need to basically measure the spans and cut those out, and I just used some little finish nails to nail those into my supports. You may notice that I ended up moving 2 of the supports to the very edge, and then it's possible that you will need to fill in more supports as you go. For these smaller pieces, I didn't really worry about measuring. I just held it up and marked where my angle was starting, and again, it's just a 45-degree angle, so pretty simple to figure out. I also realized that I didn't mention that I painted the entire body of my fireplace before bringing it into the house in a white paint called Alabaster by Sherwin. The final step for this fireplace before I could call it done was to just seal up this little crack between the body and the mantle with some caulk. And so I just put that on there and then smoothed it down and went back with a little bit of touch-up paint for a very seamless look.